G'day, and welcome to Illimitable Living, the show that goes where others won't, to bring you the discussions we all need to hear so that you can have the discussions yourself that you really need to have. As you all know, I really love good people, their hearts, their souls. They radiate and help the world heal just through their smiles, through real smiles, with real stories and real heart. Today's guest has an abundance of all of those real necessities in life. When Anjii Bryers reached out to connect, I knew straight away that there was a real fighter before me, a soul so rare to see in the physical world that you know you are in beautiful company. Anjii is not just a fighter that pushes through what the universe throws at her, but she also fights for those that cannot fight for themselves. A beautiful soul with an infectious smile, and as it turns out, a gift for miracles. You all know my thoughts on energy healing and the many different facets that it contains in the real world, but rarely do we see such extraordinary stories, particularly helping such souls that have nothing but love in their hearts. What we experience shapes us to become what we need to be, to help us deliver on what we came here to do. And rarely do we see such an extreme example of that. Rarely do we see examples of such unconditional love offered by humans to those that need it most. Join me today for a story you don't want to miss. G'day, Anjii. It is such an honour to have you here.
Hi, and thanks for having me.
You're very, very welcome.
Pleasure.
And look, I'm excited to be doing this on Zoom. It's a video that I'll also post on my Facebook page and across social media and all that sort of stuff. I really want to get the world to hear what you've got to say, and more to the point, for them to understand what it is you offer the world. But before we get into the real fabulous end of this sort of stuff, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your story of what brought you here, and some of the hurdles that you faced getting to where you are now.
Sure. Look, I've had an incredible journey, and woven with horror, fear, and pure bliss. And I was able to get to a point from, my tribulation started from when I was 3 years old, and went right through, and until very recently. We're all on a learning curve, and I am fortunate to have had a grandmother that was extremely beautiful, and I believe that she walks with me a lot. And she taught me a lot of very spiritual things. I remember having recurring nightmares when I was about 4, and these were chase dreams. Mm-hmm. And I, in my dream as a 4-year-old, I saw a man cutting a woman in the stomach with a big knife, and it was recurring. And my grandmother said to me, she said, "Well, just finish it." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, just finish the dream." And I said, "Well, how do you do that?" And she said, "Well, you just, in your dream, you just, at the end of it, you just call the cavalry in, and they come in and they take him away to jail, and it's all finished, and you won't have the dream anymore." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I did that, and this nightmare finished. Yeah. And so I was brought up from such a young age with my grandmother as my sole joy in my life and my great teacher. And I was brought up into a world where I believed that everyone did dream work. And so I spent my life doing this. And, she taught me to believe in fairies in the garden, and all of the animals talking to me. And, she wrote a book when she was 89, and her little page about me was talking about how I was this unusual child. And my bed was so full of all of the broken toys, that had the hair cut off. They brought in these new dolls that had growing hair, and so my sister thought she'd cut her doll's hair, and of course it didn't grow back. Yep. And all of these broken toys lived in my bed, and there wasn't much room for me. And I was given a cat from these people for my 3rd birthday, and it was everyone hated this cat, but this cat just loved me. And when I started school, my grandmother said at 2:45 every day, this cat would leave the house, and she would watch it run 2 blocks down and wait on the corner for me to come home from school. And it used to wrap its arms around me, and I could dress it in doll's clothes, and it would sit in the in the pram, and I just had this relationship with animals, and I would have conversations. We'd talk for hours and hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we've lost in our life is, my great discovery of how simple it is that we've sort of put, veils between us and that connection. Mm-hmm. And the first thing is being told you're silly, or you're a bit cray-cray, or and so we put these things in front of us. And through all of the lessons that life taught me about having courage, I'm 56 years old, and to date nothing has destroyed my soul. So that tells me a lot about the courage that we have as people. And I believe that all of your listeners are here because they do have courage, and they do believe in more, and they do strive to step into that space. And what I love about your guests is that your guests all bring to the table the tools that they can use. And my tool is overcoming trauma, and being able to look back at trauma. And having had PTSD, so I had someone decide that if he couldn't have me, nobody else in the world would. And so I spent a few weeks in hospital, and it was a rather bizarre experience. He trashed our house. He rang the hospital pretending to be my father, and saying, I can't get to you, but I can get to your kid. This whole big trauma. And looking back and learning from things like that about how your body reacts to trauma and how you can override that was a wonderful journey, really, once I embraced it. And working with animals was something that came back to me. So once I started clearing all of these shackles and chains, and spending a lot of time thinking, why me? I'm such a gentle soul. I don't understand this. Why do I have to be a warrior? Why do I have to, literally fight for my life against people? And the discovery that because you needed to be strong, because you needed courage, and you needed to experience it so that you could then share that with other people. And you actually have the knowledge of where they're at in that particular space that they're in. And you can go, oh, yes. So this is a little trick that helped me and help people come forward in a stronger and faster way. So one of the great things I like about working with people with PTSD is that, for example, men, soldiers and ex-police and things, they don't want to bleed on the table. They don't want to talk about all of the terrible things that have happened to them. They just want it gone. And to be quite honest, all of our memories, all of the smells, all of the sounds, all of the sights that we've experienced in our life are in us. They're all in us. And so we can understand this by meeting someone that, I don't know, I just don't like him. But we can discover later that he wears the same aftershave as that douchehead boyfriend we had when we were 18, right? And it's the smell that's actually made our brain kind of go, oh, no, back.
Yeah. And Old Spice has got a lot to answer for, that's for sure. Yeah, right. Or the Brute 33.
And Brute. Yeah, for sure. So being able to release these things, we know that they're there. And when people go through years and years of therapy, every week for an hour, we are at the psychologist and pulling apart and going in, and we're actually reliving the trauma, right? And then we go away, hours up and off you go, and you're actually standing in the middle of your trauma again, because your brain and body reacts as it did in the first time. Yep. And so when you get 2 or 3 years of that, you've got people that are completely crushed. And what men love about doing this is that we can actually go in and go, so here's me. You're standing in a pond of poo. I'm not going to climb in there with you, but when you're ready, just swim over the side. I'll reach out my hand and you can pull yourself out, and then we can dry off and move forward. And it's just brilliant.
I love it. I mean, you've been through some real challenges in your life. You've had a recent challenge in your life that, from what I can understand, really opened your eyes up to a lot of things.
You're talking about the cancer?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Yes, I've had a couple of cancers. This one was breast cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and it was stage 3. So I was actually working on a horse with a vet and an equine dentist down in Melbourne, and we were in the field, and they had her anesthetized, and she'd had a tooth that was stuck up into her top jawbone, and so we were all working to bring this tooth out. And I got kind of a sore rib from it. So I went to my osteopath and got treated, and I just happened to be at my GP on a rare GP visit about a month later, and she said, "So anything I can, anything going on?" I'm like, "No, not really." I said, "I've got a bit of a sore rib though, and I got it fixed, but just didn't seem to be going away." And she said, "Oh, why don't we get an ultrasound on that?" And I'm like, "Really?" And she's like, "Yeah, go and get one. At least then you know what's going on in there." So it's like, okay. So I went and got an ultrasound, and as they do, the technician said, "Oh, got a bit of a technical problem with the machine. If you mind, I'll just go and get a technician." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And she comes back, and I'm thinking, "Oh, that's not a technician."
Mm-hmm.
And they're sort of looking at it, and then he says, "Look, I think you need to go and see your doctor tomorrow. They'll have the results." And I'm like, "You got to tell me." He's going, "We actually can't. Just go and see him." And yeah, that's when they said, "Look, this looks like a very serious cancer. It's very big, and so we need to do biopsies and things, but we're not quite sure if it's stage 3 or stage 4." And I'm like, "What does that mean?" And they're like, "Well, it's pretty serious, Anjii." So I got the biopsy, and they said, "Look, we're not going to know if it's stage 4 until we operate, really."
Yeah.
And so they said, "Although there's a very huge waiting list for this, you've been put in as next cab off the ranks. So your operation is in 2 weeks' time."
Right.
And I said, "Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. I want my son to be here." And they're like, "No, it's got to happen." I said, "No, it won't." And so 3 weeks' time, and my son came down, and we did the journey together. And it was stage 3, so that was great. And so it was a momentary thing of like, okay, again, I looked down the barrel of mortality, and so how am I going to work with this? And I thought, what, I've been talking to women about cancer and working with themselves for over 20 years now, so I get to actually walk my own talk, as I like to do, and do this journey. And I just treated it like, I found out what they do and how they do it, and I'm like, okay, so you put all these toxins in, and then it kills my cells off at 600 times faster than normal. So I'm going to treat that as reincarnating real time. So I want to come back taller, better looking, with a much better attitude, right?
Nice, love it. Love
it. And so, if you can turn these things around. The other thing I did that is something that I've learned is that every physical illness, like these types of things, there's actually an emotional component to it. And I've taught this for a long time, and I actually had a client contact me and say, "I want you to know that they've actually done these scientific studies now," because I always say science is only correct until it's corrected. So I believe in science, but as we develop in technology, we're being able to get clearer and clearer.
Yeah.
And these scientists had actually found some kind of substance with these new cameras, some kind of substance around cancer cells. And they regrettably said, we think that perhaps it is emotion. So in my cancer, I did a hypnosis, as I do for this one, and I went down and I looked at the cancer, and I wanted to follow it back to where it came from. So we have, we all have cancerous cells, but we turn them on or turn them off. So something in you changes it to where you turn it on, right? So I wanted to go back to the moment where my body made the decision to create these cells. Now I went back to three particular points, right? Mm-hmm. My mother leaving when I was 3, my own mothering and feeling like a failure, because I was a solo parent and I couldn't get him university, and I couldn't buy him a new car when he was 16, and all of those things. Yep. And there were, 3 incidents that timed up. And when they actually cut out the cancer, I said to them, can you photograph it when it comes out? And they're like, what? And I said, oh, please just photograph it. I'm doing a blog or whatever. I came up with something. They said, okay. So these surgeons photographed it for me. And you know what that cancer had was 3 prongs in it. It was really amazing.
That is amazing. And not surprising to me either, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
These journeys that we often go on are often reflective of the traumas that we experience, the pains that we have. I'm a sexual abuse survivor myself as a teenager. And for me, it was the realization that these things happen to us to make us who we are to become, so that we can actually fulfill the purpose we came here to fulfill. And without those things, we can't actually become that person. We then don't have the experience in this life.
Yes.
To be able to fulfill that. It's an interesting thing in your introduction there as well. You mentioned these nightmares that you were happening, and I've got some theories around nightmares that usually 3 to 4 year olds have. And a lot of them are brought on by the realization, albeit perhaps subconsciously at the time, but the realization that where they came from, e.g. the spirit world, their true self, that is now being left further and further behind in their memory. And the real life, or hell, as some people refer to it as, is in fact actually more and more of their reality. So there's this disjoint between their true self and their physical self. And so these things often bleed through also from past lives. These cellular-based memories, this storing of information that we have happens from past lives through to current lives as well. So it's very possible. And I love the advice from your grandmother there. Just play it out, close it off.
Well, it's really interesting that you say that, because quite often in hypnosis, so as a hypnotherapist, I treat it very differently. I work with people in a way that, I'm not telling them what's wrong with them. Like someone that's here because my sex life, I've lost my drive, I'm feeling frigid, but I still love my husband. And so, the norm would be to go down and go, so imagine it like a big juicy steak. Feel the juices, right? For me, it's like, well, you love him, right? So let's go down there. You've got the car, I've got the keys. Let's go down. Let's make a nice fire by the lake, and we sit down there, and you can ask the questions. And and I'll say, look, let's go back to where this comes from, because it's not based in something that you're aware of. And it's amazing how many people go back to a past life. They go between lives. Like they say, oh, I'm in like this big room, and there's all these people here guiding me into this life, and we're having a discussion, and they start talking about that. It's really interesting. So many people go back to the womb as well, which I find extremely interesting.
Yeah. That is, I've heard stories about it. I haven't done that myself. So I've progressed back to many past lives. In fact, loved it so much, I became a past life regression therapist as well. So I'm trained by Tony Riley, one of my co-hosts. So she comes on regularly, and we have a great chat about past lives and past life regression and the benefits of visiting. And
absolutely,
Dr. Brian Weiss, who's famous psychiatrist and psychotherapist from America, he obviously talks at length about regression therapy, and that his clients started stepping back into past lives and started documenting it all and all that sort of stuff for the great material that we now know and love. But part of that was the realization that just through seeing where the issue originated from and understanding how that originated, we're actually able to close the loop on it, close it out. And therefore, ailments that have happened in past lives can actually be cured in the current life. People can move on to remarkable results.
Absolutely. I've only ever had one issue with Weiss's work, and I've always had this issue. It's like I cannot understand why he keeps throwing people back, and he goes, go back to the place where this happened. The most memorable thing that first comes up in the person of a past life is their actual death scene, right?
Yes.
And he can frame that travel.
Yes, that's right.
To all he has to do is say, go back to a great memory. Go back to a happy memory in that life, and they wouldn't be being constantly thrown back into that trauma. It's just like always reading his work, I'm always like, oh.
I think the reason why a lot of that's done, and I've done some of this myself as well, is because often it's those traumatic events that carry through those trauma scars. But I agree with you, and I think it's then managed about how the facilitator handles it. You know, whether you can actually get the person to just step out of that moment for a second and look
Yes.
on as a third person, so that they're not caught up in that emotional context, but they're actually seeing the event for the factual truth that you would experience. But I agree, there are definitely different methods, and all of them have their merit, of course.
Yes.
Tell me, what led you to energy healing? I'll get into your particular thing in a minute, but there's a journey that in the research that I've done about you. Obviously, you've had a number of different traumas throughout your life, and look, for what it's worth, those traumas are not a great deal different to a vast majority of the women that I work with and treat. So there's no surprises there for me, certainly, and there won't be for our listeners. But what made you, I mean, obviously you had a grandmother who was very open-minded, which is a great start. But what helped you make that transition, that real understanding towards energy-based work?
Well, one was a reading from a guy called Mammon from Byron Bay. I really wasn't into any of this stuff, and I really I didn't like the whole industry. You know, when my son was way back in 6 and 7 and things, because you had really good people suddenly drop out of their corporate job and start wearing cloth and silver earrings and not showering and not buying their kids medicine because they could no longer afford it, and I sort of had a bit of a dislike for the industry, but I still always had this healing within me, right? Does that make sense? There's a natural healing that happens with animals. I moved to New Zealand and bought a little house in the countryside to be close to my grandmother when my son was little, and I sort of ended up with people's hunting dogs were brought to me to work with and things, after they got stabbed and things like that. But the big drive to it, the big drive to healing, I guess it was just a natural process, and recognizing things in the normal system that weren't working, and just having lots of dreams, having lots of confirmations from spirit that this is what I'm meant to do. So, for example, one of them was I had an ex that sort of didn't like the fact that he no longer had attention. So he was sort of, trumping up charges every day, and he'd want a court battle, and it was just exhausting because I had this little boy and I had to keep going. And anyway, so one night before one of these, when I was exhausted, I was absolutely broken. And I was in bed and I'm sort of sobbing into my pillow and I'm going, why is this, I have to get to court tomorrow and get a lawyer, like this is just ridiculous. And I sort of had them saying to me, well, you're not going to get a lawyer. And I'm going, well, yes, I will. And they're going, no, you won't. And I'm going, well, I will. And they're going, no, you have to learn, like we're trying to teach you that you are courageous, that you don't need anyone to fix things for you. And this is a lesson. So, if you could learn it now, it hurts us more than it hurts you to keep teaching you this, but can you just get it? And you're not going to get a lawyer, just go and do it. And I'm like, I'm sobbing, and I'm, the world's so mean to me, and the universe is mean to me, and you're all mean to me. And they said, look, in your cupboard in the hallway, down on the left-hand side, in a box further down, there's actually a piece of paper in there from the hospital in New Zealand. And when this guy had rung there, what they'd done is that for my own safety, they actually put me into the psych ward.
Right. Yes.
Because it had 24-hour guards, and they said, this guy obviously can't be trusted, and he's making really serious further threats.
Yes.
And I'm not afraid to do so. So they put me in there, and so this paperwork was from that hospital, saying about the incident and the post-traumatic stress and the everything else on it. And so they told me in this dream, they said, look, so he's going to turn up tomorrow. He's actually going to have a fancy little lawyer with him. Don't even be threatened by that, because you need to go, but you need to take this bit of paper, and you need to take your last 3 years tax statements with you.
Right. Yep.
And they are in the, so I'm like, okay, I never knew this piece of paper existed. You know what, in the morning I checked and it did exist, right?
Awesome.
I took it and I was able to, and they did. His lawyer was saying, you know, she's actually mentally unstable. She's been in a psych ward. She's obviously psychotic. And the you know, judge looked at me afterwards and said, what have you got to say? And I said, look, well, first of all, I'd like to, you know, I hope he paid his lawyer up front. And, you know, look, here's some pieces of paper. And the judge read them and he ripped through this lawyer, you know, how dare you come into my court and treat me like I'm stupid. So it was amazing. But the great thing was that
love it.
These people that spoke to me from up there sort of said, look, you know, if you can just get through this, we'll let you win lotto. So, you know, and I kind of, stopped my blubbering a bit and was like, okay. And anyway, months later, I'm driving down the freeway in my car and I'm like, I went, hey, you told me I was going to win lotto. Where is it? Right? And I'm driving along and I could literally feel the air ripple with their laughter. And they were like, well, you know, would you have got through it if we hadn't said that? Mm. And by the way, Anjii, in order to win lotto, you actually have to buy a ticket. And this just absolute laughter. And so, you know, I've always had those experiences and it became a natural move. But moving towards working with animals came when I was working with SES. Mm-hmm. And I rang my son one morning and I said, I've had a dream. And he's like, yep, because, you know, he has them too. And we've grown up in this world. And he said, what happened? I said, I'm leaving SES. And he said, oh, good. I'm like, oh, okay. And he said, so what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'm going to heal animals. And he's like, yep, okay, great. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he said, what sort of animals? And I said, well, they showed me this crazy mother horse and its eyes are rolling in its head and it's like got all this foam and it's going like this. And he goes, oh yeah, okay, cool. And I'm like, no, it could like kill me, right? And he's like, yeah, but what a way to go, Mum.
Love it.
And so I just left my job and I went and did this. And you know what? I met that horse in Melbourne. I met it on a racetrack, and it it's a lovely story in itself. And
so you met this horse on a racetrack. So it was what, before the race? After?
Well, no, it was. So I sort of don't want to get into too many details just for the trainer's privacy on this one.
Yes.
But I was at a racetrack and they were doing training early in the morning, and I was working with another horse that was there, and this trainer come stomping by and I said, hey, what's going on? And she said, oh, the fucking thing that he's got out on the track and the jockeys jumped off him and they said he's crazy and they won't let him run and they, oh my God, and she's freaking out and I'm like, oh, hey. All right, you want me to go and see him? She said, yeah, cool. Yeah, do what you can. So I went around and saw him and he was literally there. He was so stressed that all of his chest and his legs were just drawn in like this and he was just foaming, like frothing sweat and his mouth was foaming, his eyes rolling in his head and he was like this in the stall and so I just stood there with him, you know. I just stood there with him until he calmed down and I just stood there and said like, hey dude, what's going on? I said, you know, you do this every day, like you have the same rider every day and it's just a ride around the track, you know, what's going on? And eventually this horse communicated with me. So what happens with your energy when you're communicating with animals or people is that we all emanate, right? This energy in it, and it has these senses, almost like a, you know, cat's whiskers, right?
Yeah.
Imaginary cat's whiskers. And when we're in the space of someone else or an animal or a plant, that theirs is coming out and they actually interconnect. And so what this therapy is that piece in the middle where you're both.
Nice.
And so this is how people say it. I don't know if I was going crazy because it was just like I just suddenly knew this stuff or you know, I just had this picture of this or I could hear this and it's like, yeah, that's what it is. And that's why it sounds and feels so crazy because it's kind of part of you, but it's not part of you.
And we all know this type of energy because, you know, I describe it as the energy shared between two very intimate lovers,
Yes.
you know, where both of the energies come together, they kind of intermingle like that, and they just spin and rotate and roll, and they just, you know, do this beautiful thing. And,
Absolutely.
you know, words don't need to be spoken. You both fully understand what's going on. You both know exactly when to meet in the middle, you know, all this remarkable stuff. Yet, of course, we discount it with animals because we've been led to believe what I refer to as a whole range of indoctrinated lies, that animals are animals and humans are humans and we're all separate. We're all disconnected, when in fact it couldn't be further from the truth. We are, in fact, all connected as one. We just have forgotten how to understand it, to read it, to feel it, to know it.
And you know what, you bring up a really, really good point there. So if you imagine that when you're standing with a, you know, a horse in a paddock, you're like, right, I'm going to go communicate with the horse today, and you're like, okay, speak to me, speak to me, speak to me, speak to me. Right? It's like we're pushing stuff out, right? We're kind of I need, and that becomes this you know, wally wizzy wall between us.
Yeah.
But when you're with your lover and you've had the glass of wine and the oysters and the, you know, the romantic music, you know, Barry White, oh yeah, then your energies start just softening up, and all of these barriers are actually falling away. And so this actually gives you a perfect example of the perfect biofield connection.
Nice.
And that's what you are. You're there clear of all fears, all things. So thank you for that. You've actually given the perfect analogy of biofield therapy and how it works.
Great. And because biofield therapy is something I wanted to talk about. Now, I've heard about it before. You know, I've heard of other things. You know, you've got other types of healing energies, call it techniques, systems, practices, whatever the label you want to use. You know, we all know of Reiki and that sort of stuff, the laying of hands. There's also Emmett's therapy. I used to know an incredibly beautiful man who was actually an extraordinary carpenter. I mean, this man could do miracles with wood that you've never seen before. And he was an Emmettherapist and he used to do a lot of work around my farm as a carpenter. And every now and then he would say to me, this was before I really kind of fully understood what was going on. He would say, you know, Sarah, and Sarah was my beautiful border collie. I had Sarah for 17 years. Wow. Although she thought she was a farm dog, she really wasn't. She was a princess. Because sheep, sheep. No, I don't have to chase them and stuff. They can just do as they're told, you know. Like, or if they don't, who cares? I'm off for a walk over here. I want to go and lie in the river over there. But you know, he would say to me, you know, Sarah's feeling a bit tight and tense. Do you want me to have a look at her? I said, mate, you fill your boots, go for your life. But even just the way I used to talk, and I mentioned this in my book, Free from Fear, briefly. If there was ever a moment that I needed to get out into the paddock, it was when I was frustrated or feeling in my head or, you know, caught up in my ego or whatever, you know, feeling angry. Just walking in amongst the grass, going and sitting under a tree. And every single time I'd go and sit under a tree or go and find a rock in a paddock to sit on or something like that, the cows would always come up to me and start sniffing my ear and just dribbling all over my shoulder and all sorts of crazy gooey stuff. And the sheep were the same. I mean, sheep are sheep. You know, sheep don't like getting too close to you. But when you're sitting in that beautiful space, you know, I used to have sheep come up and lie down next to me and lean against me and all this sort of stuff. When I was in my filthy mood, not a chance. Although the goats used to love me when I was in a filthy mood because they'd run up and they'd dance around and just be daft and everything like that, knowing full well you can't be good, you know, angry in the presence of a goat.
So they bring humor, right?
Oh, remarkable. That's right. And I love this energy stuff because the thing I love about energy, and I understand it's the same with biofield energy work, it transcends all languages. It transcends all races, all species. You know, I say that energy is the single language, like love. Love is the purest of all energies, in my opinion. But energy is the single language across the entire universe. There's not a creature, a being, an insect, a fish, a bird. There's not one that doesn't know and understand the language of energy. So it doesn't surprise me that that is the key modality that you use in working with animals. One thing that caught my eye about you, apart from your great smile, and you'll have to excuse me, I'm a bit of a crazy smile guy. To me, a person's smile, male or female, is the one shining light that really displays their true soul, because the way the eyes smile with the mouth, the way the face lights up, the way it just changes worlds. I love that. And I love that about your smile too. But with that and the energy that goes with it, it's the offering. And of course, whether it's accepted or not actually doesn't matter. It's still felt.
Yes.
So that energy, that type of thing, I'm assuming that a fundamental backbone of Biofield therapy, as I believe all energy work, all good energy work is, that the fundamental backbone to that is that unconditional love. That
you
just
on the nail. Yes.
Offering it. And I'm assuming that's really what, because there's something about horses. I don't fully understand it myself. I've experienced it with cows. Those bloody damn crazy goats. And certainly with my beautiful Sarah, my old border collie, who's since passed. She didn't want to leave the farm when we left 3 years ago. She wanted to stay. So she's now growing a beautiful dogwood out there at the farm.
Beautiful.
There was something about her that she was my greatest teacher, without a doubt. No question about it in my mind. What is it about horses particularly? Because, I once knew a remarkable lady. Sorry, I still know a remarkable lady. We haven't been in contact very much, called Rosie, who did a lot of work with horses in Patagonia and overseas. She was a diplomat's wife, a remarkable, remarkable lady. And for her, there was something about horses. There is something completely unexplainable. Can you explain to me, what is it about horses? What is in those horses' eyes that we connect with so much?
Just the pureness of heart, a pureness of heart that they are a great God energy or source energy or universal energy. And all of these animals, horses, dogs, cats, insects, birds, are all here to heal and help and guide and watch over. Many animals are here to provide a life of service and to give service by giving their body to create life, right, for us. Horses, we don't eat, but I believe that what they are here for is to just give pure love, unconditional love. And it's how we treat them that makes them sad. The amount of horses I've met that are just sad and they don't understand, and they don't understand our humanity. Like, there was a discussion the other day about a particular horse actually that I was working with was just angry that people were holding on to their stuff, and she was working with them to bring them through, right? To access Biofield, and there was all these barriers in front of them, their own fears, and she said again, which is said so many times by animals, like, I don't understand why you hang on to your trauma. I don't understand why you walk around with this stuff and it emanates out of you and it comes in the world and it's struck against us, and like, what's the point of holding on to your trauma as humans? And they have they literally have no concept of why we do it. You know, they have trauma, and their trauma is not held on like the way we are. Their trauma is held on like, I don't trust humans because my experience so far has been extremely cruel. But they are still open to that one soul that has that energy that interacts, and they kind of, oh, here's some pure love, right? And they will open to that, whereas we will continue life being, you know, a 70-year-old untrusting man, angry woman, you know. I hate all men because that one was an asshole. And you know, they have no concept of that, of like being open, be smart, but being open. And I really believe that horses are here to teach us about relationships, to teach us about connection. And they seem to have a very, very strong spirit that actually crosses spiritual boundaries of whether they're alive here in the flesh or whether they've left. They will come in and share messages. And I know that probably sounds a bit crazy, but I believe them to be, you know, gatekeepers.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Of the greater realms, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that before. And look, I think that is such an incredibly important question. Why do we hold on to our trauma? You know, what is that about for us humans? Because, you know, the one thing running a farm, you know, again, you know, we had cattle, beef cattle, we had sheep, the ducks, the chickens, you know, the crazy goats, you know, all the fun stuff. The one thing I learnt, and it was a really profound thing for me at the time to learn, was that animals don't have egos, except in the presence of humans.
Yes.
And because there is something about, I mean, humans, we all have egos. We know that. I speak about that at great length. I've written books on it all. But there is something about the way the human ego, I don't know whether interrupts, interferes, integrates, something about, and the animal then catches it. And in the same way, I don't believe animals feel fear, not in the human context of the word, until they're in the presence of humans.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they ask that question. I mean, for a horse to say, why do you hang on to that trauma? To me, the answer is, well, because I have an ego and you don't.
Well, speaking of that particular horse, so that particular horse was pretty angry, right?
Yeah.
And she was stomping around and shaking her curls and like waking me up and swear words, right? Now, sometimes this horse speaks like an eloquent medieval English poet, and then other times swears like a trooper. And sometimes I'm laughing because I'm just like, where did that word come from? But she was just like, oh my God, do you understand how hard I'm working? And I don't have the time to mess around. And these people are just wasting my time. I need you to, and I'm like, hey, you can't do this. All of my animals are running around my house now, traumatized because of your energy. You can't come in here and keep waking me up and stomping around. Now, you need to think of a better way to have this conversation. And you need to think of, you know, and I explained to her that, you know, we're just idiots. We hold our trauma because it's our fears, and you actually have to allow people their own journey. You know, if people don't want to accept your teachings or healings, then that's actually their choice. And you just have to understand that you gave it. And so she went away and she came back and she's kind of like, yeah, okay, I get that. So I can just like, you know, I've given them this gift of my knowledge, and if they don't want it, then that's their problem, right? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, yeah, I can do that. Right. But
Fabulous.
So it's not so much an ego, it's like a, oh my God, do they, you know, and she will say, I have given the people this privilege of my teaching. So it's, these things are said by animals not as an ego, but as a gallant spirit that
sure
be taken seriously. And I think one of the greatest things that animals don't like is to be insulted, is to be treated as subservient. And does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, no, it absolutely does.
To them we are equal equal energies, and we share knowledge. She's learning and we're learning, and she was amazing at learning. She like picked it up and ran with it really well. And dogs are the same. All animals are so incredible. Now I've got to say in this that not all horses communicate, not all animals communicate. Just like people, some people are interested and some people aren't.
Do you think that's a vibrational frequency thing? I mean, a lot of people talk about this thing called vibrational frequency, which is just the substance of the energy ultimately. Do they not communicate because there's an incompatible set of energies, or do you think it's more complex than that?
Well, I don't know. Something that I've learned from this horse, and this is all very recent, and by the way, she just passed on the weekend, and she let us all know that she was passing, and so we were there with her, and it's an amazing story in itself. And
look, first of all, sorry to hear that, but
it's okay.
Obviously it was time, and look, I've got a very different perspective towards death than most people.
Yes,
so I see death as a beautiful thing, not,
and what she was able to teach through her passing, and by using me as a translator for this group of people, was that she was able, like she said, I want each of you to understand. I want each of you to learn about eternal life, that we are, and another horse passed right earlier in the week, and she was there to teach then, and she was saying, she was saying, you can grieve your loss at them not being around in the paddock, but to us, and she actually did a circle with me with these people, and she actually took them through in this other horse that she was working with. She's been training horses out there. I know this sounds crazy, but she has been training other horses to communicate, and these horses have come forward.
So just to clarify, the horse that you're talking about that has since passed, she was training other horses herself?
Yes.
That's remarkable.
Yeah. So her message right from a year ago was that I don't have a lot of time, but I want to get this farm up and running. We are meant to be here healing, and we want to bring it all together, at least in my lifetime. I'm 31. I don't have a lot of time. And so it's become more and more important until about a month ago. And she's like, right, we've got to crack on. We've got to do this. And so she's actually been, she's been working, teaching other animals what she's been learning, right?
Great.
And how to communicate. And these horses have sort of come forward, and suddenly people are hearing these horses talking to them, right? So when this other one was passing, Tessa the horse, Tessa the Great, as she likes to be called. So no ego, but just that's
No, right? I get it.
Yeah. I deserve this label. Yep. And so Tessa the Great said, so I'm going to take you all through, and I'm going to take you through what we experience, because to us, death is birth, right? So we don't, we will grieve each other of the body, but then it's gone, because it is our birth into our new and greater existence. And so she actually took all of the people in this circle through what the horse was experiencing, right? And she said, I want you to feel, and da da da, the last breath is like 30 seconds, it's no, and then she took them up, and she took them right up into the sky and into the forelock of this horse, and it burst into it was an incredible experience. Like, there were just people from all around the world, right, via Zoom, bawling their eyes out with just the beauty and the energy that this horse was bringing through, through me as a translator, and this other horse were doing to teach these people about what death is to an animal, that it's a natural death, not a, and that was incredible. And so then a week later, when she was able to go, she'd tied it up all her backyard, she'd put everything in place, organized everything. She went down on Friday, and she went down in the stable, and she was sort of talking about that's not really where she wanted to be anyway. In her last few breaths, she made this mighty effort and got back up, and stayed there. And then her owner, Ernst, he found her later going down to the field, and he's a psychologist, right? So this is all extremely new to him, and was always kind of like, and he's walking past her, and she sort of looked over and said, I'm going down the field to die down there by the tree. Okay, you good with that? And he's like, Yeah, all right, no worries. I'll look after it. Right. And he's come up and he's gone, oh my God, Tessa just told me that, right?
That's so beautiful.
And where they found her was beside that tree. Now she went down during the night and she waited with her little friend Pascal
Yeah.
watching over her, and she waited until the owners got up and found her and came down to the paddock. And as they arrived, Pascal, her little pony, walked away, and they were with her. And then she was able to go through the process, and so we all went through that together with her, via messenger and things, and went through the process. So pretty cool stuff, right?
Look, I'm going to jump in here for a second, and I'm just going to. You'll have to excuse me. I'm feeling a little emotional. One, for the beautiful story that it is, the truth that is spoken. But I want to address something because I know there's probably some of my listeners, and look, to all my listeners out there, you've heard me cover some pretty crazy stuff. Let's be honest with you. Trust me, with the episodes that we've just had over the last few weeks, there's some crazy stuff in there too. So if there hasn't been for the last 12 to 18 months, there was a particular moment I remember clearly. I was, let's just say, a little young to my awakening, a little fresh. This was probably pushing 10 years ago, something like that. I was on my farm. We had all of the ewes were dropping, and we had this particular beautiful ewe that when lambs come out, they come out with both paws right up near their chin, and they kind of squeeze through. This particular lamb wanted to do it a different way. It wanted to put one front leg back, which is really quite catastrophic because it makes it incredibly difficult to come out. So I remember finding this ewe in distress. I remember picking up this ewe, bringing them into the safe space of the cattle yards, where we then managed to basically get the ewe down onto a side to try and help pull what they call pull the lamb. And I remember having my son there, who had already pulled it. I got to say, my young boy Sam, who's no longer a young boy, he's a young man now, was the first to pull a lamb on the farm. He beat me to it. So anyway, so I had him by my side, holding the phone to my ear while I had my livestock manager on the phone.
Yes.
And a big shout out to Charlie, rock on brother. I loved all your work and love you dearly still. Now, Charlie raised on a dairy farm, a real salt of the earth guy. He's never going to mix his words about anything, and he's sure as hell going to tell you if you're talking a load of shit. So anyway, he's on the phone to me there, and he's trying to tell me what to do, and I'm trying to describe it because he was on his way over. Anyway, we're sitting there, and nothing's working. I'm not getting any further. Mum's getting more and more distressed. Baby lamb's getting distressed. I could see the nose in one hand, one leg poking out. Eventually, I got to a point where I hung up the phone. I put both hands on the beautiful ewe, and I just said out loud, "Come on, I need some help here. I don't know where you are. I don't know what you are, but I need your help here." And literally within 3 seconds of me saying that, that lamb shot out in the big sploop that happens when a lamb hits the ground in all of its goop and all of its beautiful mess. My son's sitting there just celebrating, getting all excited and all that sort of stuff. Of course, I'm really emotional. And the interesting thing was, some time ago, someone who I used to have people visiting the farm all the time, and they were either shamans or just people, different people, and that mostly was to give me messages. Which, of course, at the time, most of them I didn't believe until I was told by the 6th or 7th person the same thing over a period of time. And eventually I thought, okay, I'll listen, I'll get your point. Anyway, one particular lady had said to me that I had a pixie on the farm. Now, I'm not a fairies guy. I'm not a pixies guy. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm a pretty grounded sort of fella, very practical. But it was the pixie I was talking to when I said, enough's enough. I need your help. We've got to get this done. And it was a funny thing because I even told my livestock manager after that, what was going on. And he said, look, mate, for what it's worth, weird shit happens all the time that we can't explain. We just got to go with it. So, look, I just want to be clear to everybody. Anybody who thinks this whole talking with animals stuff is a little bit cray-cray, what my thought is? That's exactly why I wanted Anjii on the show, because I know for a fact it's not. I know this stuff is real. And as I have said to you countless of times, until you start accepting the fact, the truth of the matter, that there is more going on than you could even begin to comprehend, the moment you remember that is the moment freedom will start to arrive and your mind will open up and you will start seeing and experiencing miracles like no other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what an incredible story. Sorry, I've just got a cat trying to come in the door.
That's all right. That's all good.
Knocking on the door. Give me 1 second.
Not a problem at all. I'll keep talking because this stuff is really, really important. We hear these messages all the time, but we've taught ourselves over the years. We've been taught, we've been indoctrinated into a system. This veil has been put over us where we lose the comprehension. We disconnect with that reality. The reality is still there, still talking to us. Our intuition, our higher self is talking to us all the time. The problem is we're the ones not listening.
Absolutely. And it's what I love about what I teach and what I share is that this is actually the key to everything. Is that when we are born, we have a voice, and then we learn to say words with it. And then we learn to develop this voice and yell and shout and whisper. And then we learn to sing, right? So this is exactly the same thing. It's just a deeper level of ourselves. So to me, not learning to understand this part of ourselves or to find this part of ourselves is like walking through life as a mute,
Yeah.
And the key to finding it is to actually recognize that we all do it, right? So it's not you're weird and I'm weird and some other people are weird. It's actually, no, we've discovered a piano, and I started off playing Bar Bar Black Sheep, right? And then Bar Bar Black Sheep, and now I'm playing Chopin because I practiced and practiced and practiced. And now I get to share that simplicity of it with people because I just say, just pick up the piano. Just know that the piano's there. And you know what? Just use a finger. Cool. Now try 2. Brilliant. Look what you're playing, right? And the key to all of this is to let go of our trauma, to let go of our fears. Because if you can imagine now that you're walking through, like one of those movie sets and they have all the flowing curtains, and there's the moonlight sort of vaguely behind it, and they've got these flowing curtains and you're walking through, and you can't see the moonlight because it's in behind these shrouds, which look fantastic, but they're really just not showing you the moonlight, and when you have the great music come on of the soul and you sweep the curtains away and you sweep the last one open, and there is the moonlight. And you know what? It's not moonlight at all. It's actually freaking sunlight. And that's how simple it is.
Yeah, I love that analogy.
Yeah, just, you know what? I don't need this trauma. The trauma that I had, abuse that I had, I know that I came here to do what I'm doing. The journey that got me here was one of teaching me to speak my own speak, to walk my own walk, right? And talk my own talk. So I'm not talking from textbooks. I'm talking from having a brain and a persona that was able to eventually, right? Okay, I'm not magical. Eventually, last week, go into those traumas and say, wow, what if I set them up for myself, right? What if I What if I had a mate called John up there, wherever we were before here, and he loved me and we'd had many lives together and we'd done these great things and he just loves me, right? And instead of coming down to be my soulmate of love in this life, I said, look, so this life I'm going to kind of dedicate to bring awareness to the world, because, we're getting to these very strong times where people either need to be strong or they're going to fall. And, as they say in the Bible, in these days, the strong will get stronger and the weak will get weaker. And the world become divided and children will be divided against the parents. And they need strong people to come through and stand up and say, hey, it's actually really simple. And so what if I set that up and I said to him, look, can you pop down in this life and do this one instead? Just sort of, I need that, because I need to sort of pull out that courage, and I need to have that experience of going through that process of coming back from that trauma, so that I can then share it with people and we can put the keys into place for them. And he's there going, don't think so. And I'm like, come on, it'd rather be you than someone I don't know. And he's like, oh, fine, I'll do it. And imagine if we spend all our life hugging this trauma and like, oh, this is so awful, which it was, right? But
sure.
And then we leave this life and we get back up there and there's John, and you're like, oh, wow, I forgot that we were like the best of friends through many lives. Hey, you know what? Thank you for doing that for me. Thank you for sacrificing your life to teach me something that I wanted to get done. I really, really appreciate it, because I did get it done, and I was able to, before I died, get to the top of my Mount Everest of learnings, and then I was able to share that with other people, and we were able to help many, many souls come back and find this, right?
Yeah. And, I love that story. I really love that story, because it's a beautiful way of putting it. Sometimes before we arrive into this beautiful little thing called a baby for this current life, we set out a plan. And sometimes that plan is of something magnificent. Sometimes it's a plan of something ordinary. Sometimes for that plan to work, we need some people to do wonderful things for us. But sometimes we need the arseholes in our life.
Absolutely.
And we ask those arseholes to do those things. We do. We don't in this physical world. We don't understand it. We don't remember it. That's kind of partly the point.
Yeah, exactly.
In the same way, I carried the trauma of my sexual abuse for 20 odd years, my head in the bottom of a bottle looking for answers. You've all heard that story. It wasn't until I realized that my abuser was my greatest gift, because that abuse formed who I am now, to be able to know and understand the things I needed to know and understand, to learn and experience what I needed to learn and experience, so that I can now do what I came here to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is perfect, right?
Yeah, always perfect.
How perfect. You are this brilliant soul that can understand and empathize with people that have had this trauma for their whole life. Their whole family has had it. There is guilt for generations about what's happened to them, and you can come in and share this knowledge with them of take it, become great because of it. And the moment when you get to the moment where you can say, oh, okay, it was a bit crap, but hey, I learned so much. I learned how to recognize a predator. I learned how to recognize a victim. I learned how to recognize grooming, and I learned how to keep my own children safe. And now I can share that knowledge with other people so that they can bring their children up to remain safe and strong, right? So always something to be learned, and then you can let that person go. So the key to moving into your self zone is to, wow, that's that curtain. Okay, so I've pulled away, my sadness and my hurts, but now I've still got that dude standing there, and I can look at him and go, finally, I can look at him and go, thanks for teaching me that. It's really cool. And here I am, right? Amazing because of it. And so now I can let you go forever.
And there is
and
nothing
you will no longer steal my life force. And I will be a strong and gallant soul because of this incredible experience that brought me into being this huge, gallant being.
You know what?
You can go.
I love that. That is so true. There is nothing more empowering than getting to that particular point. And when you realize that, what also happens is next time something else comes along, you just go, I got this. This is a no-brainer. I know what this is all about. You see it before it even happens. So, in fact, the trauma doesn't occur.
Yeah.
But what you do is you prove to yourself that you actually learned the lesson, which means that it never needs to happen again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
You know what, Anjii, it has been such a pleasure to be here with you today. You know what, I would even be so bold as to perhaps suggest we should talk again, because I think you've got some really beautiful stories that I'd really like to get into.
Thank you.
About, because it's the stories that people really, really love to hear. And I think some of those stories are really, really important, because when people start to embrace this thought process, the stories also help lift those thin bits of the veil off, and it just opens people up just gently, ever so gently, time and time and time again.
Absolutely.
Just sows those seeds. So, you know what? Thank you so much for coming on.
We also haven't finished the story about the horse at the racecourse, so I'll have to come back to finish that for your listeners.
Great. Let's do that in a big
part.
They'll
be sitting there going, but what happened to the horse? I can't believe you haven't finished the story. See you next time, listeners.
Yeah. So, okay, before we finish up, how do people get in touch with you? I know many people with horses and around Australia particularly. How do they get in touch with you if they want to connect with you and get you to do some work?
Look, I don't have a great presence online. I somehow, I kind of despise it, but then it's a necessary thing, right? In order to share a message. But I just don't enjoy it. So I have Instagram, but I never put anything on there. I have my Anjii Bryers Biofield therapy Facebook page, which sometimes I put things on, and I have Anjii Bryers Biofield YouTube channel, which I've just had to turn into a brand channel in order to put longer videos on. So I'm getting there, folks.
That's all good. Take your time with it. And just for everybody, Anjii Bryers.
And they can email me.
Great. Okay, so I'll get your email in a second. Anjii Bryers. That's Angii. No?
J for John.
Wow. Can't believe I got that
wrong.
Wow, that's rude of me. Sorry.
That's okay.
Anjii and Bryers, Bryers.
Yes.
Beautiful. Anjii. Okay. You know what the funny thing is? I've actually spelled it correctly in the introduction here that I've written several times. I can't believe I got that right. Okay. So that's good. So what's your email address if you want people to email you?
So it's Anjii Bryers, or Anjii B for Bob, at gmail.com.
Anjii B at gmail.com. ANJIIB at gmail.com. Beautiful. Awesome. Love it. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us this week. I am going to definitely get Anjii back because we have so much to talk about and we've got to get right into things. And of course, you need to hear what happens with the crazy horse at the racetrack. So, Anjii, thank you again for coming along. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, everybody. Take care, and we look forward to connecting with you again next time.